We're going to create an artwork today that plays with space. One definition of space in a work of art is the literal area that you have to work with, the square inches of paper or canvas that you are painting or drawing on. For this activity, we're going to need a piece of paper, we're going to need a pencil, I'm going to bring an eraser just in case, and we're going to need a ruler. Let's start with our first line. Now, since my ruler is only long enough to reach across the paper this way, then that's how my first line is going to have to be. It's going to have to be vertical, going from top to bottom. That's vertical. So I've got some choices. I could make one big shape and a little one. I could make them close to the same size. Try your best to make the shapes different from each other. My first vertical line is going to go right here. And now my one piece of paper is two shapes. We're going to continue to divide these shapes until we have a total of 10. And we're going to do that only with horizontal and vertical lines. So this is a vertical line. It goes from top to bottom. A line that goes from left to right is horizontal. So how about right here? Let's continue until we have 10. Horizontal and vertical lines only. Do not cross over any lines. And now that I have 10 shapes, I'm gonna stop. If you accidentally have 11 or 12 shapes, it's no big deal. You could erase some lines and get back to 10, or you could just keep the 12. Our job is to divide these shapes into 3 groups and decorate each group separately. I like to begin by marking my shapes into their 3 groups. I do that by marking some of them with a number 1. The second group will all have a number 2, and the third group will all have a number 3. Now I make sure to draw those lightly because I need to erase those numbers so they don't show up in my final artwork. Now, one of the goals when we're dividing these shapes is to try to keep shapes from touching the same number. I'll show you how it works. We're going to start with this shape because it's touching 2 other shapes. So starting here, if this shape is touching a 2, it can't be a 2. And if it's touching a 3, it can't be a 3. So what's left? A 1. And that's going to lead us to this shape. It's touching a 3 and it's touching a 1. So what's left? A 2. And we continue all the way to the end, trying to use that method to spread our shapes out. So this shape right here is touching a 2 and a 1, so it has to be a 3. And now that means this shape right here is touching a 1 and a 3, so it has to be a 2. This shape is touching a 2 and a 1, so it has to be a 3. We can do either of these first. Let's do this one. This shape is touching a 3 and a 2. So it's going to be a 1. And now we're down to this last shape. And it's touching a 1, a 2, and a 3. So now you have to make the decision. Which shape or which group does this need to be? This one is touching that 3 really closely. They're sharing this whole edge. It might look weird if 2 3s are touching with so much space connected together. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that because it's only touching this little bit of a 2, that'd probably be the least disruptive to the artwork. So I'm going to make this one a 2. If you decided that your last shape needed to be a 1 because all the 1s are little, that would be okay. The goal is to try to balance all the shapes. And now that they're balanced, our next task is to put a pattern in each group. So we're going to assign a pattern to a group. Your pattern could be something that you draw freehand or with a ruler. I'm going to do a little bit of both. For the 1s, we're going to make them have these wiggly stripes. So that's a 1. I'm going to continue on. I'm going to think of a pattern for the 2s, and I'm going to think of a different pattern for the 3s. Patterns are complete. I showed you 3 different ways of making patterns. You can freehand draw your patterns, you can use your ruler to help draw patterns, or you can find something to trace to draw patterns. Remember, the goal of this is to balance the shapes out. So we want them to be spread out so that we have a little bit of each pattern in all the parts of the artwork. Before you start coloring, the first thing you need to make sure you do is erase all of the numbers from the spaces. Another challenge is selecting colors that are going to allow each group to stand out for themselves. To make it even more challenging, you might also try to pick colors that are still unified with each other so that each group is separate, but the entire artwork works together as a whole. Neatness is going to be very important in the coloring of this artwork. The neater you can be when you're coloring it is going to greatly affect how successful the end product is. This is group 1 completed. You can see that all 3 shapes in the group use the exact same colors. They're not in the same order, but they're the exact same group of colors. For my second group of colors, you can see that I used one color that was the same so that these 2 different groups still work together a little bit, but then I incorporated 2 new colors into the pattern. And I'm going to do the same thing with the third group so that even though all 3 patterns are different because they have different colors, they still have something in common with each other, which is going to help them work together as one artwork. I put one final touch. I used a dark blue marker to trace all of the shapes and the patterns so that I could clean up the edges of everywhere that I colored. Now that everything's colored, you can also see that I chose to use colors that are all within the yellow, green, blue area of the color wheel. That's called an analogous color scheme. An analogous color scheme is when you choose colors that are close together on the color wheel because they work together a little bit better than using random colors. So there you have it, our Mondrian inspired artwork that incorporates patterns into the shapes. Remember, there are literally millions of different ways that this activity could have ended up, tons of different color choices, tons of different ways that the shapes could have been arranged, so many different patterns that could have been included inside the shapes. Even though we've done one, there are many, many different options that still exist if you decided to do this activity again. So I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next week. Bye.